Okay, so is there a right way to live? A singular right way to live? You might not think so. I actually do, and it comes from Aristotle. It's about 2,500 years old, and I think it is absolutely riveting on how Aristotle's view could change our life. Stay with me. We're going to talk about it. Okay, so quickly, the purpose of this show is really to get to the core of what matters most in life. This is a show where it's my goal to help people think well, live well, and think more deeply. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of competing media today, and I want this to be something where people walk away thinking, I learned something new that I had never heard of before. I ask you to will you right now like this video? Will you subscribe to this channel? Maybe make a comment. It actually really helps me in the YouTube world. So let's get to it. Okay, so Aristotle's living about 2,500 years ago. He had a teacher named Plato. Plato's influence on our education today, we could have a video, we could have 100 videos just talking about that. But Plato was very interested in what he called forms, right? Ideas. His teacher was Aristotle, and Aristotle very much was interested in forms. And by forms, I just mean think of sweetness, think of the color white, okay? Those are ideas, different from, tasting sugar or looking at snow. So Aristotle wanted to ground reality in the world, in the physical, tangible. And he talks about a lot of things, but to understand this video and understand this idea that I'm going to present, that there's one way to live, that there's a right way to live, let's think of that, a right way to live. We're going to have to get to Aristotle's metaphysics very quickly. Now, some of you are going to want to tune out right now. Don't, because this is rather phenomenal. So Aristotle, in his book Physics, he talks about how every single thing, think of a thing, anything out in the real world. It could be your iPhone or smartphone. It could be a book. It could be a piece of paper. It could be a Kindle. It could be a liver. It could be a car. It could be a bucket. It could be that rug across from me right now. Anything has basically four components. And we're going to get to people being one of these things. I'm giving you a little hint right now on where we're going. But he says they have these four things, four causes, if you will. So let's take this book for a second. This book has what Aristotle would refer to as a material cause. Every single thing is made of stuff, right? But that stuff has a form. This isn't just a bunch of pulp, however they make paper. I think it's pulp and then they turn it into paper. So there's material cause, but there's also a form to that. This has a form also. So it has material, it has a form, and in order for it to be a book, it had to move from being the pulp into being put together. So it has what Aristotle calls an efficient cause. There is movement. This applies to every single thing. And this is the most important one. It has a final cause, or what we might call a function or a purpose. So this book has a purpose. It has a reason for which it was created. It has a very particular purpose in this world, and that is to be read. Same with this phone, same with this Kindle, same with my liver, same with the rug, same with a dog, same with a fence, same with you can go down a list, a carburetor. It doesn't matter. It actually could get kind of ridiculous. This key light that I'm looking at, it has a material, it has a form, it was made, and it has a purpose for which it was created. And some things function really well, some things are kind of dysfunctional, and some things are non-functional, and at that point they become trash. So the point here is simply that if all things have a purpose, if all things have a final cause, well, what about people? Because after all, people are things too. So what then? We know what the purpose of a book is. We know what the purpose of an iPhone is. We know what the purpose of a Kindle is. We know what the purpose of the rug over there is. And our liver and the chair I'm sitting on, what's the purpose of a human? Now, this is very logical. He's just saying a human's a thing too. And he uses this word happiness. Now, forget what you think about happiness, because what Aristotle is thinking about is not that thing. And in the ethics, in the Nicomachean ethics, he goes through some of the things that compete for happiness. And we all know them very well. He talks about money, and he basically dismisses that and says, well, money cannot be the thing, because money is a means to an end. It's not an end. And Aristotle's interested in the end, the purpose, the reason for which things exist. So he says money can't be the thing, physical pleasure can't be the thing, because what distinguishes us from pigs or dogs or whatever animal is that we're different. And we're going to get to this, we're thinking things in a different kind of way. And he comes up with this phrase of excellence in accordance with virtue. And we just have to think about this reality. We are different from the animals in our intellectual capacities. Now, he is not talking about learning a lot of facts. He is not talking about being a rocket scientist or anything like that. He's just basically saying we're different. We're different from the animals, and we are rational. And if you think about dogs, for example, dogs definitely have desires. But dogs don't have the capacity, as far as we know, to be sitting thinking, well, I really eat too much, and I really want to learn to eat slower because it's just better manners. And this year I'm going to commit to eating half of what I normally like. We're able to think about our desires. Technically, it's called second-order desires. And so we have this incredible rationality. And Aristotle wants to say there's this distinctive that we have, and our life, our end, our telos, our purpose is excellence in accordance with virtue. Specifically, he's talking about a mean between two extremes, a deficiency and an excess in 11 areas. So right now, I'm talking about how we could live our lives, and I'm going to go through some of these virtues. But he's basically saying, in order to be a Simone Biles, in order to be a Misty Copeland, in order to be a Kobe Bryant, not at ballet, not at gymnastics, not at basketball, but at life itself, how we play, if you will, how we dance, if you will, how we perform. At life, there needs to be a certain excellence in these 11 areas. It's functioning in the way we were intended to function, not good at these other things like I just talked about, but good at being human. So let's go through some of these virtues, and they show up in our lives every single day. So let's take, for example, temperance. So for temperance, Aristotle refers to our desire for physical pleasure, food, drink, sex, sleep, basically. And he says that there is a way to fail in how we interact with pleasure, and that would be in a way of excess. And nobody in this world, in no culture, since the beginning of civilization, looks at if I don't even know which words are politically incorrect sometimes, but like a slob, like just a total glutton, somebody that just is, we might say a pig, somebody that they just eat too much and drink too much and sleep too much, and the person doesn't work, and the person is just an exemplar of laziness. We don't look at that person ever and hold that person in high esteem. In any culture, we would just look and think, wow, that's not the way human beings are meant to function. So there's excess with respect to physical pleasure, but then Aristotle would say there's a deficiency, somebody that absolutely has no appreciation and no desire for good food, drink, sleep, sex. The person is just absolutely unconnected to physical pleasure, is a kind of masochist, if you will. Not out of some kind of religious conviction, but just is disconnected. We would say, gosh, that person has no fun. I don't like going to dinner with him or her because they are so dry. So he says there's this middle with respect to physical pleasure where we enjoy food, we enjoy drink, we enjoy sleep or sex, but we enjoy it to the right degree. And we are not controlled in this way, and we're not controlled either in this way. There's a right way. Let's take a second virtue. So that'd be one virtue. It would be to be temperate, he would call it. Let's take courage. There would be an excess, which would be someone who just wants this. They're just reckless. They're just going to die really soon because they are just looking for danger in a way where they could die at any point, and they end up dying. They have maybe too much courage. There's no sense of self-preservation in that person. Fear in the right way at the right time, he would say, is a good thing. But also somebody who is so afraid that they do nothing but live in order to not die. And they're setting the alarms on all their cameras outside their house and locking all the doors. He would say this is no way to live either. There's no courage. There's no fearlessness in terms of going out or in a moment of needing to protect a child from being raped. A courageous person would, in a right way, go and help that person, where the person who is absolutely terrified would just run in the other direction. So there's a right mean between excess and deficiency with respect to things like courage and humility. This is what I like. He says, there's a way where we're just so arrogant. Perhaps we've had elected officials recently that just came across as just so crass and arrogant, and I'm the greatest at everything. I am the greatest. I'm the biggest. What I do is the best. All the time, he would say there's a lack of humility there. But somebody who is just absolutely cowers in public and goes around talking about how they're nobody and how they're nothing and has zero self-confidence, we wouldn't look at that person as virtuous either. And Aristotle would say the mean is between this person over here who's very crass, who's very arrogant, and also this person over here who has no confidence at all. There's a mean. And so virtue is this balance between the two, and he has 11 of these. And so this is the way to live, according to Aristotle. Okay, so the easy or hard part. You have to think of the metaphor of athletics. I think this is the best way. If you want to get there, if we want to get there, if we want to achieve excellence in creating and crafting a life. I remember watching news about Kobe Bryant. He passed away in Los Angeles. Actually, I was landing that very same morning at about the same time, give or take an hour, and there was very dense fog that tragic morning. And Kobe is known to have woken up very early in the morning, 4 or 5 a.m., every single day, and would train. He would train like nobody else. He was famous for this rigorous commitment to his craft. And of course, this is always the case with anybody who is excellent at anything. There is this connection between habituation, what Aristotle would call habituation, and their excellence. Muscle memory is a perfect example of how training at a thing ends up becoming second nature. And so when Simone Biles is on the balance beam and she's doing a backflip or whatever, she's not thinking with the same degree of intensity as she was the first time she attempted it, because she's done it so many times it becomes second nature. And so the way that Aristotle would say we become excellent at life with respect to courage, with respect to temperance, with respect to magnanimity, which is one I really love, is by practicing. You've heard before, do one scary thing every single day. I think Eleanor Roosevelt might have said this. The idea there is the more we practice doing things, let's say socially in front of people that might be embarrassing, after a while, it's going to become second nature. We're not going to be so afraid. He says excellence is an art. I love that he calls it an art, because it means that life is an art. We're talking about art here. Again, we're crafting our life. He says excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, But we rather have those because we have acted rightly. Whoa, he flips it around. Let me say it again. We don't practice temperance or bravery or whatever it might be, the 11 virtues, because we just have virtue or excellence. But we rather have those things because we have acted rightly. They come to us. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And that's the end of the quotation. And so paralleling, practicing these virtues is the way toward excellence. And the reason for which we were created was not just to do well and be well, but was to function in accordance with our rational faculties. Now, I want to simply say a few kind of disclaimers at the end here. Aristotle doesn't go into anything regarding spirituality. And it's unfortunate for me because of the era. I mean, it's not like he was introduced to Zen and understood something like mindfulness. And so this, to me, isn't a comprehensive way to live. Obviously, religiously speaking, Aristotle was not interested in religion as we know it. And so he's not talking about God or worship or anything like that. Thomas Aquinas merged the scripture with Aristotle's teaching. He got in a lot of trouble from the Catholic Church in Paris and other places. He saw as one of the fathers of the Roman Catholic Church and greatest theologians of all time, how this idea of flourishing and being happy does equate to, in many ways, a biblical perspective of having a good life. And interestingly, virtually every one of these virtues tie into the three monotheistic religions and many of the other religions at being good. And so the call to action, number one, is to practice these things. Number two is to subscribe to this channel. And number three is to understand that there is a better way to live than many of the quick fix fads we see being peddled to us on the internet and on apps and on social media. See you next time. I appreciate your time. Bye-bye.